I bought 58 acres of pristine woodland, just outside the Meadowbrook Heights HOA jurisdiction, and within 3 days Karen Dennison, the HOA president, was standing at my new property line, demanding I submit architectural plans for approval. Name is Marcus Webb, and I work as a civil engineer for the county planning department. So I know property law better than most people. Had specifically purchased this land in March of 2023 because it sat exactly 400 feet outside the HOA boundary, which I verified through 3 separate surveys, costing me $2,100. Total property cost me $375,000, and I plan to build a modest cabin for weekend retreats. Karen showed up on March 18th driving her white Mercedes SUV and parked it directly blocking my access road. She got out holding a clipboard and told me that as HOA president she had authority over all properties within a half-mile radius of the development. He told her politely that my land was outside HOA jurisdiction, and I had the survey documents to prove it. Said surveys could be wrong, and that she would be reviewing all my construction plans. Personally explained I did not need her approval for anything and asked her to move her vehicle. Karen refused and said she would call the police if I attempted to proceed with any construction. Without proper authorization, he pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency line. Myself, Deputy Rodriguez, arrived within 20 minutes, and I showed him my survey maps and property deed. Confirmed I was outside HOA boundaries and asked Karen to move her vehicle. She argued with him for 15 minutes, claiming he did not understand property law. Deputy Rodriguez told her she was trespassing and needed to leave immediately. Karen finally moved, but shouted that this was not over. 12 days later, I received a certified letter from Meadowbrook Heights HOA demanding I attend a special hearing regarding unauthorized land use. The letter referenced HOA Covenant Section 12.4, which supposedly gave them oversight of adjacent properties. Checked the actual covenant language in Section 12.4 only applied to properties within the platted subdivision. He wrote a formal response citing the legal description of my property and declined to attend their hearing. Karen responded by organizing a blockade. On March 25th, I arrived at my property to find 7 cars parked across my access road. Karen was there with her phone filming. As I pulled up, she announced loudly that concerned citizens were protecting the community from unregulated development. He recognized several people from the HOA, including Tom Chen, the vice president, and Barbara Mills, the treasurer. He asked them to move and explained again that they had no authority over my land. Karen said they would stay until I agreed to submit to HOA oversight. He called Deputy Rodriguez again. This time he brought another officer. Deputy Santos. He told the group they were illegally blocking a private access road and needed to disperse. Karen argued they were exercising their right to peaceful protest. Deputy Rodriguez explained this was not a public area and they were trespassing on my easement. He gave them 5 minutes to leave. Most people got nervous and started moving toward their cars. Karen stood firm and said she would not be intimidated. Deputy Rodriguez warned her she would be arrested if she did not comply. Crossed her arms and said, "Do what you have to do." Arrested her for criminal trespass and obstruction. Screamed the entire time about violations of her constitutional rights. Booking report later showed she was released on $500 bond. He thought that would end it, but Karen was just getting started. On April 2nd, I had a contractor deliver materials for my cabin foundation. Delivery truck driver called me at 6:30 a.m. saying someone had chained the access road gate. He drove out and found a heavy chain with a padlock securing the gate. I had installed. There was a printed notice zip-tied to the chain reading, "Property under HOA review, no access permitted." I called the sheriff's department and Deputy Santos came out. He showed him photos I had taken before the chain appeared. Cut the lock and tagged it as evidence. Installed a camera system that day pointed at the gate and access road. The cameras cost me $840, but I knew they would be worth it. On April 7th at 2:15 a.m., my phone alerted me to movement at the gate. I watched the camera feed as Karen and Tom Chen used bolt cutters to cut my new lock. They replaced it with another chain, and Pedlotsky called 911 and stayed on the line, watching the live feed. Deputies arrived while Karen and Tom were still on the property. Both were arrested for criminal mischief, destruction of property, and trespassing. Bolt cutters were seized as evidence. Karen's bond was set at $2,000 this time. Tom's was 1500. He received a harassment call from Barbara Mills the next day. She said I was destroying the community and Karen was only trying to protect property value. He told her Karen was breaking the law and hung upon April 12th. I received notice that Karen had filed a lawsuit against meth complaint alleged I was creating a nuisance and demanded I cease all construction activity. Asset also claimed my property was somehow bound by HOA covenants. Despite being outside the legal boundary, EC forwarded everything to my attorney Robert Kaminsky, who had handled my property purchase. He reviewed the filings and said the lawsuit was completely frivolous. Who filed a motion to dismiss and a counterclaim for harassment and abusive process. Hearing was scheduled for May 15th. Meanwhile, I proceeded with construction after obtaining all proper county permits. Permits were approved on April 20th and I hired Brennan Construction to begin work on April 24th. Someone vandalized my construction site. He spray painted HOA rules apply across the foundation forms and slashed the tires on a cement mixer. Damage totaled approximately $4,300. Me cameras caught everything. Footage clearly showed Karen and two men I did not recognize. They arrived at 11:45 p.m. in a dark pickup truck. One man did the spray painting while the other slashed the tires. Karen stood watch with a flashlight. He downloaded the footage and filed a police report. Immediate Detective James Morrison from the Sheriff's Department contacted me the next day. He reviewed the video evidence and identified the two men as Karen's brother-in-law and his friend. Warrants were issued for all three individuals. Karen was arrested on April 27th at her home. Mash was charged with felony criminal mischief, conspiracy to commit vandalism, and violation of her bond conditions. Two men were charged as accomplices. Karen's bond was revoked, and she spent 4 days in county jail before her husband posted $25,000 bail. The local newspaper ran a story on May 1st about the HOA president's arrest. Headline read Meadowbrook Heights HOA president faces felony charges. The article included details about the vandalism and previous arrests. Within 2 days, a petition circulated among HOA members calling for Karen's resignation. She refused to step down, claiming she was being persecuted for defending community standards. The lawsuit hearing on May 15th lasted less than 30 minutes. Judge Patricia Henshaw reviewed the property surveys and covenant documents, dismissed Karen's lawsuit entirely, and awarded me $12,500 in attorney fees. Judge Henshaw also issued a restraining order prohibiting Karen from coming within 500 feet of my property. Karen tried to argue, but the judge cut her off. The criminal case went to trial on June 22nd. The prosecutor was Assistant DA Michael Torres, who had a reputation for being thorough. The video evidence was damning, and Karen's defense attorney looked miserable. Karen testified in her own defense, claiming she was protecting the neighborhood. She insisted she had authority to enforce standards on nearby property. Ismer Torres played the security. Footage showing her clearly participating in vandalism. Jury deliberated for 90 minutes. They found her guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for July 18th. Judge Raymond Foster presided over sentencing. Reviewed Karen's prior arrests and violation of bond conditions, sentenced her to 18 months in county jail with 12 months suspended. She would serve 6 months actual time. Also ordered her to pay restitution of $4,300 for the vandalism. Additional fines totaled $7,200. Her brother-in-law and his friend received similar sentences. Karen's husband paid the restitution and fines. Immediate Tellish reported to county jail. On July 25th, HOA held an emergency meeting on July 20th and voted unanimously to remove her as president. Chen also resigned as vice president due to his criminal record from the gate incident. Barbara Mills became interim president and immediately sent me a formal apology letter. She stated the HOA respected property boundaries and would not interfere with my land. I appreciated the gesture but maintained my security cameras. Karen served for months and was released on November 18th for good behavior. 2 weeks after her release, the Dennison family put their house up for sale. Listing price was $595,000. Seat sold in January 2024 for $560,000. They moved to a town 60 miles away Completed my cabin in August of 2023. Final construction cost was $112,000. Seat is a beautiful 1,500 square foot timber frame structure with large windows overlooking a creek. Spend most weekends there and have had zero issues with the HOA. Since Karen left, several Meadowbrook Heights residents have actually apologized to me. Personally, a neighbor brought me homemade cookies and said she was embarrassed by Karen's behavior. New HOA President Barbara Mills occasionally waves when she drives past my access road. My property value has increased due to improvements and the area's growing popularity. A recent appraisal came in at $495,000. Have had multiple offers from people wanting to buy, but I am not selling. This is my sanctuary away from work stress, and I plan to keep it. For Verkeren's criminal record follows her permanently. She cannot hold HOA positions anymore due to her felony convict. She only heard through local gossip she tried to join her new neighborhood's board and was rejected. Her husband divorced her in March 2024. Divorce filing cited irreconcilable differences and financial strain from legal fees. Feel no sympathy. Had multiple chances to walk away and chose escalation every time. The total cost to her was approximately 6 months jail time, $7,200 in fines, $4,300 in restitution, $12,500 in my legal fees, and probably $50,000 in her own attorney costs. Add in the loss on the house sale and the divorce, and she destroyed her life over property she never had authority over in the first place. Still see Deputy Rodriguez occasionally when I am in town, always asks how the cabin is doing and laughs about the whole situation. Detective Morrison told me it was one of the clearest cases he ever worked. Me attorney Robert Kaminsky uses the story as an example when teaching seminars about property rights. He framed the judge's order dismissing the lawsuit and hung it in my cabinet. Reminds me that following the law and standing your ground works when you are in the right. The HOA still operates, but with much more reasonable leadership. They focus on actual subdivision matters and leave outside properties alone. I have heard they updated their governing documents to clarify jurisdictional boundaries. Several members told me Karen's behavior had been escalating for years. Before I came Alan Gappertly, she tried to fine people for ridiculous violations, like wrong shade of mailbox paint or grass being a quarter inch. To tell me situation was just the first time someone pushed back hard enough to expose her. The community is better off without her toxic presence. I continue working as a civil engineer and enjoying my weekends at the cabin. Last month, I hosted a small gathering for some colleagues. Everyone loved the property and the story of how I acquired Eton. Friend joked I should write a book about dealing with HOA terrants. Maybe someday I will. For now, I am content knowing justice was served. Karen lost everything because she could not accept basic property law. Meanwhile, I gained a beautiful retreat and the satisfaction of standing up to a bully. If you enjoyed this story of justice and want to hear more real-life revenge tales, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel QZ Stories, where I share stories of people who stood their ground and won.